Hello, everybody. This is Ananda, Europe, and I am Dartna. And we are realizing a series of interviews to help our European Sangha family, Guru Bhais, and spiritual seekers in general to gain a deeper understanding of Ananda. And Ananda is all about people. So interviews are a wonderful way to get a deeper insight. And today I am here with Shanti Rubenstone, who is the spiritual director of an urban community in California, Ananda Palo Alto. So I'm sure this is going to be a very interesting and inspiring conversation. And let's start at the beginning, Shanti. Since we're talking about Ananda Europe, since the interview is realized by Ananda Europe, maybe you can tell us something about your European ancestry.
My European ancestry. How did you know?
Because you can hardly meet Americans who don't have European ancestry. Am I right or am I wrong?
You're absolutely right. Yes. Yes, my family actually came over from Eastern Europe, from Russia, both sides of my family, very early on, actually between the First and Second World War. So they emigrated before the Second World War started. And they both sides of my family were able to set up in the United States. So my father's parents were very Eastern European, very Russian, actually, in nature. They knew no English when they came, but great souls, I will say. My father's mother was, now I can say, a true incarnation of love, with all of that Eastern European, really wonderful essence about her. Yeah, and then both of my parents were born here in the United States.
So you are the second generation, is that right? Yeah, wonderful. So the questions can become pretty classical, but the answers are always new. So where did you grow up? And then how did you come in touch with Ananda? How did you find out about Yogananda, who's the great inspiration, and Swami Kriyananda?
So I was born into a Jewish family, and my family was not so much, but I was what we would call a practicing Jew. That's how it's spoken of. I was very involved in Judaism, and I became a little less enamored with it as I got to be closer to 20, mostly because, as you may know, in those days particularly, so that was the late 60s, the rabbis in the United States, at least, this you wouldn't know, but even today, speak of the Jews as God's chosen people. And I think it was Master's calling that whispered in my ear one day, the God that I'm seeking simply could not have a chosen people. And I love that. I'll just say here, many years later, as I started reciting the Festival of Light, which I'm not sure if you repeat it in Europe a lot, but we do.
We do. Every Sunday.
And there's that beautiful line in there, your chosen people have always been those of every race and nation who with deep love chose thee. And long before I knew Swamiji, long before I knew anything about our teachings, Master's teachings, I knew that somehow. So I just began a search, and every year I would take 1 month out of my busy life and traveled literally to different places around the world.
Just Shanti, you're now in your 20s, right?
This was in my late 20s. That you're now in your 20s.
No. I'm completely in your story, so we're in the year now.
This is in my
20s.
My middle 20s.
Middle 20s.
I started traveling, and I met wonderful spiritual teachers of all traditions. I don't need to speak of them now, but people who were very well known at the time. And coincident with that, my husband and I moved to Southern California, and we lived in a town called Leucadia. And Leucadia is the very next town to Encinitas, where, of course, Yogananda came, and Mount Washington, and then the Encinitas Hermitage were settled. I knew nothing. I didn't even know what the word Swami meant. And for those of you who haven't seen yet the Encinitas Hermitage, it's beautiful, and it's a sprawling piece of property. I'm sure everybody knows this, that sits right on the cliff of the Pacific Ocean. It's quite spectacular, as we could imagine, for an avatar. And I did not know him, but I was looking, and I will say, without telling the whole story right now, this was in now 1977. So I was exactly 30 by this time. I was trying to decide what to do with my life, whether to become a clinical psychologist. I was just thinking of everything. I was a nurse and had a beautiful career. And Yogananda came to me one day. So he had left his body in 1952. I did not know him. We used to joke, my husband and I, about Swami's place, but we had no idea what it meant. And he came to me as I was doing a run on the beach right beneath the Hermitage. And he told me that I needed to go to medical school. It was, I heard it as if you said it to me right now. And I didn't know Yogananda, but I knew it was him. And I turned around in my run, and he told me it should be an Ivy League school. Because
So what kind of school?
Ivy League. The Ivy League schools are Princeton, Yale, Harvard, Duke. They're the finest.
Yeah, prestigious. Yeah.
He said I would need credibility. So I ran home, and I just walked in the house and said to my husband, that Swami came to me and told me to go to medical school. And I remember my husband, who already was a physician, said to me, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to medical school. And that was it. I applied to all of the, what we call Ivy Leagues, but I also applied to Stanford, which was not an Ivy League for many reasons, but considered one of the top medical schools in the world. And of course, I was accepted at many of them, not because of me, but because Master had come to me. And coincidental to that, Ananda was just moving right into the area of Stanford University. And the story could take all of our time. It's fascinating, just in the way everybody has their story. This has nothing to do with me in terms of intention, but of that great soul saying, now's her time. I will get her. I will pick her up. She will not know what happened to her, and I'll place her in Stanford Medical School. And we were just buying East West Bookstore. They became a part of Ananda in the United States. Many colonies had an East West Bookstore. We still have ours in Palo Alto, which is in, we call it Northern California, but it's about halfway up the state. So we have East West Bookstore close. We have our colony. We have our beautiful temple that none of you can see, but it's quite spectacular, all within about 5 miles of each other. And it's perfect. And I was put into Stanford Medical School. That was 1979. And within months, I was with Ananda. And I'll use a biblical reference. I don't know if people know because it's from the Old Testament, but it was literally like Moses parting the Red Seas. Moses parted the Red Sea so that the Jews could cross and escape the hold that the Egyptians had on them. It was the Jewish people moving into freedom. And it's, of course, one of the big stories in the Old Testament. And I feel that's just, Master just walked in and that's what he did. And
So
I met Swamiji very quickly after that.
we'll talk about Swamiji soon. So with hindsight, why do you think Master wanted you to study medicine and to have this, like you have to be representative? Did he already have in mind for you where you were going to be serving, and why would you need that particular degree?
I don't even think I can say with all humility now at this point, I know he knew everything. And again, this would be hours to tell you, but I'll just say it in general. The number of times that my being able to either say, or it's on my curriculum vitae wherever I go, it's everywhere. Everybody knows that I'm a Stanford trained MD, and that holds enormous power. It would be hard to overstate it. Being a physician in and of itself, still, it gets people's attention. It's a big thing to do in most people's eyes. And to have that degree from Stanford, one door after another has opened. And to be a Stanford MD, and he gave me, I'm 75 years old now, just about to be 76. I still practice a little bit of medicine, not like I did, but he helped me create one of the largest medical practices in the entire United States. It was big, and it wasn't big like for me, like, look at me, look what I did. But in the eyes of other people, it gave me a voice. I was at Stanford MD. I taught medicine at many universities. I've lectured around the country over the years, and people listened. So then, along with that, I was growing up with Swamiji and Ananda in these teachings. So now, just like the words Master said to me on the beach that day, you will need to have credibility. And I did need to have credibility. And the credibility was not self-realization, because even now, that's not the credibility in the world, although it's much, much more than it was in 1979. But the credibility was the Stanford MD. And then people listen. And I've been able to speak in many places and tell, just trying to decide how much of this. It's interesting. It is, because I'm trying to write a book, and the book is all of the stories of the miracles that have happened in medicine. So I've been practicing in an office, in a hospital, and had people walk in and have a voice whispering to me. For instance, a young man comes in because he has a cold, and I go to listen to his heart. But I was irritated with him in my office because he was a new patient. He kept calling all day, insisting to come in. And I was very busy. And I said to my front desk people, tell him he has a cold. I'll see him in a day or two. He kept pushing and pushing. And finally, I said, okay, tell him to come in, but it's a quick visit, not what I think would be a great first office visit. He comes in, and in my mind, I hear, listen to his heart. But in my mind, I also hear, no, he has a cold. I'm not listening to his heart. Shanti, you better listen to his heart. I put my stethoscope on his heart. He's got a very loud and what we would call pathological, meaning concerning, very dangerous heart murmur. And to just hurry the story so we don't spend our time, within 2 days, he was at Johns Hopkins University. I was in Baltimore at the time, having heart surgery to remove an aneurysm that was right there near his aortic valve that was about to rupture. And when my colleagues from Johns Hopkins called me and said, because I said to the young man, how long have you had this heart murmur? He said he was about 32, old enough that people had listened to his heart. He said, I don't have a heart murmur. And I said to him, look, I have no time to argue with you, but you have a heart murmur. And then his whole life turned around in 2 days. And the cardiologist said to me, how did you know? And I said, oh, you wouldn't believe it. Because how can you tell people that you have this great avatar? He has stayed with me in medicine. He stayed with me in every way. Here I am, but in medicine constantly. So he knew everything, and he's always been there. And it's helped me. It's helped so many patients, and it's helped Ananda because I'm a Stanford MD. So I know Master knew every bit of that.
It is a little bit reminiscent of Master's own story, where he needed a degree also to have more credibility coming to the United States, but he never practiced his. He had the title, but he never used it for academic ends. So my next question then would be, how did you do that time-wise? Because you also dedicated time explicitly to Ananda, building the work. How did you? And then, of course, Master was working with you through you as a doctor, but he also needed you to be available to teach probably meditation or things like that. How did you do that?
Grace, in a word, grace. And again, I say this to you, Darshan, knowing I've talked to so many people. Everybody has their stories. And so much of that, I had, as I told you, one of the largest practices in the country. That's
where
the largest practice that I had was the one that I developed when I moved to Baltimore for 5 years. That was in the late 90s, but I was there only for 5 years. That practice just grew up. Then I had to come back to California. I had to. I felt I was dying there. And I think spiritually I was, because this is where the real spirit of the work was. Again, that's a whole other story. But what happened in this life was humanly impossible. So it's like all of us. If we're just channels, anything is possible. That's why we repeat that prayer so often when something comes up in our life. I cannot do this, but I know you can. For years of my life, literally years, I did not have more than 3 hours sleep any night. And yet I always felt awake and ready, Now, how is that? And I just, it wasn't me. I can't say it had nothing to do with me, because
you were available.
We have to show up as the channel. And that takes effort and steadfastness and willingness and all of those spiritual qualities that we develop over years and that we deepen over years. So how we can be used, everybody changes so quickly if we're committed, if we're serious, if we stay in there, even when it gets tough, so that how we see things one day, a month later, we look back. Sometimes I look back at a talk that I gave and I'll think, I have to take that down off of the internet because, now I see what I see. But I don't do that, by the way. But because at each moment, we're learning, we're opening, we're available. we've actually opened these chakras. We've actually let go of all of these vrittis or these blockages. I mean, this all really works, which I know you know. So, yeah, and now I don't do a lot of medicine. I still do some medicine. But the other aspect of that I want to say is I have been able to be there for so many people in Ananda when they've needed a doctor right now. And it's been so beautiful to be somebody, a guru by, children of the same master. So they trust me for that, and they feel how devoted and dedicated I am. So it's also just medically been a very big service to Ananda. Yes. Oh, yes. Master.
What did you specialize in? Did you help people mostly on a physical level or also when there were psychological or mental issues?
Both.
Both.
Physical, emotional, and spiritual as soon as I realized, which was pretty early on. So I don't think that we can treat people physically. You need to know the medicine. I had to study, I have to be good. But you cannot treat people without knowing who they are.
Yes.
And spiritually. It's just, I think doctors and other healthcare workers feel they're doing that, but they're not really helping anybody until they're practicing what we started calling in the 70s in the United States, holistic medicine, treating the whole person. And really, at first I knew I had to treat body and mind. And then in about 1977, when I met Swami Satchidananda and I started getting anything about spirituality, so I met Swami Satchidananda first, right before Master came to me, though. It was like, it was just all planned. It was staged.
He opened the door, maybe.
We opened the door, and he was a great soul. He still is, of course. But then I said to my husband, we've always thought that we had to treat the body and the mind, but now we know it's body, mind, and soul.
Sure.
And you just can't leave out any of it. It doesn't work.
No. So, Shanti, let's go now to the period when you met Swami. Can you share some precious memories that you have of your interaction, your friendship with him and his guidance?
Yes, but I have to preface this by saying I had an unusual relationship with Swamiji.
That makes it interesting.
From the minute I walked into Ananda, first through East-West, very quickly up to the village, and then but I wasn't involved in it in that way then. And David and Asha were not even down in Palo Alto yet, but others were starting a center here in this area called the Mid-Peninsula in California.
Mountain View, right? Or
now the community is in Mountain View. At that time, they
it
were
was
in
okay.
Palo Alto and Atherton. It doesn't really matter. They're all closed. But those souls who came, some of whom are no longer even with Ananda and were starting Ananda, my husband and I became very involved with them. So we would go to services here in a huge house. And Swamiji used to come down fairly frequently, but I was not in that group that had direct access to Swamiji. So in my very early days in Ananda, I met him immediately in late 1979, right when I started medical school. But I didn't see him very much. And I was not so drawn to him. I can say it that way. It's the truth. And I think it's important for people to hear that now, because here I am, a spiritual director, very, very involved in Ananda all around the world. And Swamiji gave me my life. He saved this life, but it took me a little while to awaken to that. I couldn't relate to him. I was very bhakti, very heart, I still am. And Swamiji at that time felt to me more intellectual. That was not the truth, though Master himself told Swamiji, if you remember, you're too in your head, you're going to have to learn to open your heart. But the truth was, I wasn't ready. And in hindsight, of course, I know that. But I loved Ananda. I went to everything. My husband and I used to donate a little money. It was not much, but to the beginning of Ananda, it felt like a lot. So Swamiji would hold these events at his home. You could come and have dinner with Swamiji if you donated a certain amount of money. We always did, and we always went. And I remember one time, just as a for instance, we were up there, we were having dinner, maybe 20 people, and out of nowhere, we're sitting around the table eating, and he stops, he puts his silverware down, he looks at my husband and I, and he announces to the whole table, Shanti and Barry are still so filled with ego, he said. If they just learn to let go of their ego, they will do great work. And the whole table everybody froze. But
Embarrassing.
it should have been, and particularly for somebody with ego, but I've remembered it ever since. It didn't embarrass me, which speaks to how true it was and how something in me knew that it was true. But I wound up separating from Ananda for about 7 years and going off to India mostly, but American India, with another great teacher who Swamiji used to invite to the village. It's not how I met this man, and that story is not important here, but a very great and highly evolved soul who was a bhakti yogi. And when I came back, Mantra Devi, who some of you may know, but she's been with Ananda from the beginning. I immediately, when I came, he left his body. And then very quickly, I moved into the community here in Palo Alto. That was in 2001. And I moved in here, and then I went up to Spiritual Renewal Week again, which is an annual event at the village, which I used to go to all the time in the early days. And Mantra Devi and I were talking, and she said to me, I've just had an inspiration that I feel to be true, because people had asked me if I was confused about who my teacher was, because there was Master, there was Swamiji, of course, and there was this other man, son Keshav. And I kept saying, I don't feel confused. It all feels right. But there was question about it. I was already a Kriyaban. I had been a Kriyaban from very early on. Swamiji had given me Kriya, and I always practiced it, even when I was with Sankesh Vidas. And he said to me, you should practice your Kriya all the time. But this Mantra Devi said to me, I feel that both Master and Sankesh Vidas are your teachers and your guides. And she said, I just feel that they're in cahoots almost about who will help you when in this life. And as soon as she said it, I knew it was the truth. And that was in 2001. Now it's 22 years later. And I love Sankesh Vidas, and I think of him often. But Master and Swamiji have been very clear teachers for me. But I'm saying it to say to everybody, I could say the whole vibration of Ananda, the music, the talks. I loved Swamiji's books, but it was difficult for me to relate to him. Now, if I fast forward, in the last, I would say 6, 7 or so years of his life, he used to ask for me whenever I was around him. Literally every time he would have me sit at his table when there was a big dinner, he would tell David Nasha, who he would stay with when he came here, invite Shanti over. I mean, one time I remember as we were walking into a restaurant, 20 of us, he looked at everybody. He said, I want Shanti to sit right across from me. I never understood it, but in hindsight, it came to me that he was just giving me huge amounts of energy, pouring energy into me. Never said that, but just saying, is Shanti coming? Call her over, put her right where she will be, right in my direct line. I remember one time we were having a big book launch down in Los Angeles, and I walked in the big dinner that night, and there were probably 150 people there in the back of this woman's home who owned a very big home. And when I walked in, somebody said, Swamiji wants you to be at his table. And I said, oh no, there must be another Shanti here. But then Dharma Raj, who was there, said, no, Shanti, he asked for you. And at that table that was set off to the side and it was a big table. There was only Swamiji, John Parsons, who had been our lawyer and had written that wonderful book.
A fight for religious freedom. Yeah.
Exactly. Myself and intermittently Dharma Raj. And we spent hours together. I didn't speak much. I listened. But I think that's what I was meant to do. And I feel as Swamiji was getting, I mean, again, I don't feel this. I think it's truth. I just feel it to be true because I have seen more and more and more how much Swamiji knew everything. He saw it all that was going to happen, every little thing all around the Ananda world. But he could only feed us what we were ready for, each of us who were then going to be in leadership positions. And now we all say, I was just having a discussion with Diana, who was here visiting from India. I said so many times, I think Swamiji knew this because the players are all perfectly placed. And she said, I realize that more and more. Diana said it. Every day in my life, I see how he knew. And Swamiji knew exactly what role I needed to play throughout Ananda. And he just readied me for it with so much love and respect. He didn't say to me, now I need to teach you, get ready, do this better, do that. You're not good enough at this. No, he just gave me the energy. I feel that when I say that, it was like somebody blowing up a spirit-filled balloon. He was expanding my aura. He was literally working on me at the astral spine level. And I kept feeling it. And I mean, what do you do except just constantly program about that? But what a blessing. So
Thank you. This is very, very precious, Shanti. And so let's also talk a little bit now about your role. So it probably evolved over the years, and now you are a spiritual director. And what is it like how does an urban community work? Can you say something in general? Because there might be people also in Europe who are not inclined to leave the city and to buy land or something, but they might want to expand within the city. Is there anything?
So there's two ways to do that. Of course, one is to have what we refer to as a center. You have a building where people come and you have classes and they meditate together and you're a family and it's beautiful. And that is perfect for many, many people. What we've done here and what has happened in many places and is beginning to happen in India, and of course you have it in Italy, is we have true community. I shouldn't say true because I don't want to be disparaging of the centers. Of course, that's true community. But if you can own some land, if you can rent some land for that matter, and allow devotees to live together so that you're there and you build up the energy that is Yogananda and Swamiji. And you build that so that when people either walk onto that land for an event or you yourself walk out of your home, you're not in the world. You're not needing to deal with that barrage of the foods you don't want to be eating, the sounds you don't want to be hearing, the music, the words. You have like the equivalent of a spiritual bodyguard around you. And it's fabulous. So there are about 120 of us in the community. I would say, I don't know the exact number, but maybe 90 people now are all Ananda devotees. Other people are drawn to live there. And we want to keep the community full. So there are non-Ananda people there, but mostly people who are drawn because they love the energy or they're on a spiritual path. So it works. And then 3 miles up the road, we have a temple that we own. It was a big Catholic church. You've been here, haven't you?
Yes, I have. It's good if you describe it for our.
And over the years, we've turned this. One of my early experiences with Ananda is I had a very busy medical practice right near here. But every Thursday afternoon, I would take time off and I would come here and just listen to Swamiji chanting Om. And I would polish the pews for hours. I would just polish them alone in here. Now we have chairs. We took the pews out. And I hope everybody can understand. We finally, a few years ago, it was beautiful, but we took the big cross down that was up. It's amazing that this could even happen technically. And we put a huge, our sign, a huge up there. It's beautiful. I mean, just spectacular. The whole, and of course now the temple, I tell people even when they just walk in, because the community now means all of the people in the whole Silicon Valley area. So that will make sense even to a lot of Europeans. Come here for classes, for Sunday service. Many more people than just live in the community or just confined to that family of people who are have deeply devoted their lives to serving Master and Swamiji. So we serve a lot of people. And the more time devotees and teachers can spend together, we help each other. That's why we are together. So as you said, the role changes, our energy changes. So when I first came here, I did everything. I still do everything. But I mean, I could say, okay, I'll take care of Christmas dinner. And I would make the menu. I would do all the shopping. I would carry all the food. I would cook it, serve the meal, be there for the whole cleanup. And I still love doing all of that. In fact, I still just have the great good karma to cook one of the meals that we served for Swamiji's birthday. But times everything changes. We have several people who are half my age who are just as deeply devoted as I am, who are physically strong. And they're doing a lot of that. They are great souls who can plan classes, teach classes. And it leaves me, I still do a lot of teaching, but it leaves me room to be that person who people in the community come to solve problems on the physical plane through spiritual solutions. Mm-hmm. Now, again, our people here, who many of you will know, Lakshmi, Sai Ganesh, James, these are great souls. They're counseling a lot of people in their own right. So it's not just me at all. But my role has changed. And of course, people feel that, know that. And it matters on the path mostly as you've been here for decades and decades. everything changes. It just does. And some of these younger people may be starting where I am spiritually, but they too will grow, because what else are we doing here? So, yeah, I spend a lot of time with many, many people. My days are often filled with one reading after another of counseling, and honestly, even mentoring our staff, which we happen to just be blessed with these souls who are open to that. They want that. Their egos are not in the way. So they're open to that kind of guidance, I would say. So, yeah.
So just at the end of this interview, what to you has been the most precious aspect of your discipleship and of these teachings and of your life at Ananda? Could you give something of the essence of what it is? You've already answered the question by everything that you've shared, but maybe just to focus and say something more specific.
Your question is making me cry, so I hope I can answer this.
Well, the fact that you're about to cry highlights your bhakti, your devotional nature to me.
And I feel in ways that are this is very hard to put into words, but Master and Swamiji have given me moments of feeling them right in the center of my heart, of having, and it comes, it might come in the middle of one of those talks. It might come when you're making the perfect food because you're open to their inspiration. I mean, it comes, or during a sermon. I just never know. But Master has that beautiful, beautiful way he had of expressing his experience in the autobiography of a yogi, where he talks about an experience of in cosmic consciousness. And he says, I cognized the center of the Empyrean, which means everything that exists outside of that superconscious state in the universe, as a point of intuitive perception in my own heart. And when we arrive there at our point of intuitive perception, those very precious moments that are nothing less than a pure gift, because we can't think our way there, we can't work our way there, they come. And then what is beyond words is that knowing this is what we mean. This is the experience of God is love, or the divine romance. It's beyond words. But if you ask me what's the most precious, I would say, my God, they've given me. I can now speak. I don't live there. I wish I did. But I know it's true. I know it's true. I know every single soul that has inhabited this human body can know that. And I feel my life is committed to helping other people have that experience.
Thank you, Shanti Rubenstone. I'm sure that this interview will also help many other people. Thank you so much. Thank you.